ambassador to Lebanon confirmed to CTV efforts are underway in case that happens to evacuate Canadians from Lebanon, and told us that the government has the capacity, in fact, to evacuate all 17,000 Canadians currently registered with the embassy. Have a listen to our conversation with Ambassador Stefanie McCollum. Hi, Ambassador. Pleasure to welcome you to our program. Thank you very much for making the time.
Thanks for having me. Pleasure to be here.
I wanted to start off and just ask you about your own level of concern right now about the possibility of this war expanding to another front, namely on the northern border with Lebanon.
Well, I think what I would say is the situation in Lebanon right now is unpredictable and volatile. We're watching closely the daily skirmishes that are happening along the southern border. But right now, those skirmishes seem to be contained, and so we are hoping that no escalation or spread of the current conflict reaches Lebanon.
Has the possibility of that happening changed at all, for example, the functioning of the embassy or the way in which people are working or anything of that nature?
So right now, the changes are, in terms of the embassy, our clients are the Canadian citizens, so our travel advice has changed. As of the 18th of October, we're advising all Canadians to avoid all travel to Lebanon due to the volatility. We're asking Canadians who are here to make their way home on commercial means because commercial flights are still operating out of the airport. For the embassy, we are still business as usual. We are able to open up as per regular. Our client volume is stable and manageable, and all of the embassy staff are accounted for and safe and coming into work as per normal.
When you talk about that travel advice, I wanted to get your perspective also on that, because we've heard actually the Foreign Affairs Minister be very blunt about her advice and the government's advice to Canadians in Lebanon, which is basically get out now, use those commercial flights when they're still available. Can you help us understand a bit of what is informing that?
Well, I think, as we mentioned, it's the volatility along the border. It's the risk of escalation. We can't predict what will happen. We can't predict what Hezbollah will do. We can't predict how Israel will react. So the situation is volatile, it's unpredictable, and the safety and security of Canadians is a paramount consideration for us. And so we really do want to let them know through our travel advice, but we also send ROCA messages, that's our registration of Canadian abroad messages, that if there is that feeling of insecurity, Canadians do feel unsafe and at risk, that they should leave while they can through commercial means. We're also advising, should an emergency require them to shelter in place, so should armed conflict escalate and affect their areas, their neighborhoods, we're advising Canadians be prepared to shelter in place and make sure that they have enough food, medication, and essential supplies to allow them to do so if it's not safe to go out onto the street.
If you weren't the ambassador and you didn't have to be there, would you be getting out on a commercial flight based on what you've observed, what you're assessing?
Well, I think, Canadians have to assess their own personal situation. They have to assess what type of environment is available to them, how safe they are, do they have support networks? So, as an employee of the embassy, we have a certain infrastructure and networks here that I can avail myself of. My employer provides me some support, and I think I would factor that into my decision making. But all Canadians have to factor that into their decision making, and we are advising Canadians that it's safe to leave now and they should do so.
I think the minister and various government officials in the past few weeks have told us that the number of Canadians registered with the embassy is somewhere in and around 14,000 people. Pardon me. Do you have a specific number? What's the latest number you can provide us about how many Canadians have registered with you?
Sure. The latest number I can provide is that we have around 17,000 registered Canadians, so that number has increased slightly, and we're pleased for this. We would like to see Canadians who are here register so that we can keep them informed. And we're also asking Canadians who have managed to make their way out of Lebanon to also deregister so that we know that they have made it out, so that we can really focus on those Canadians that are here in Lebanon and wanting that up-to-date information.
Do you have any idea at this point how many have deregistered, or how many Canadians, since those warnings were first issued, have left Lebanon?
We don't have those numbers, unfortunately, because we're very much tied to what Canadians tell us in ROCA. So we're watching the ROCA numbers. We don't know if they represent the full picture or just a partial picture, but again, which is why we're asking Canadians to keep that information as up to date as possible.
Do you have any sense, even sort of not to quantify, but more to qualify, do you have any sense of, since those warnings were issued or since the war broke out, if there have been a lot of Canadians who are availing themselves of commercial flights, if there is a sense among the Canadian community there that they do need to get out? What is your sense of that?
So we've seen a small uptake in inquiries. There are no Canadians who've requested immediate assistance right now. Most of the calls that we have, and they are still stable and manageable within our normal, footprint, are requests for information, for clarity, to find out a little bit more, and in particular how it would impact their own individual circumstances. And we do know of some Canadians who've availed themselves of the opportunity to depart, and we know of other Canadians who feel that that's not an option for them right now for whatever reason, and so we're providing them with other information, as I mentioned before, about potentially having to shelter in place.
So beyond sheltering in place, there is the possibility of an evacuation. And we know that because both the foreign minister and defense minister have talked about moving resources into the region in order to be able to facilitate that. We're not, I mean, the scope of one would be the biggest in Canadian history if, in fact, there are 17,000 Canadians, and it's a big if, of course, that have to be evacuated. Can you help Canadians understand who are watching right now, sort of what those plans entail from your perspective, how involved you are in those discussions, how ready really Canada might be to do that should it be necessary?
Yes, so you're absolutely right. A lot of planning and preparedness is on the way and underway, and we do feel prepared. I think I can't kind of speak to the specifics right now because, of course, the plan will evolve based on the situation that we see, but we do have resources in the region that will be ready should Canada announce assisted departure. And I think what that looks like, if you look at our past few assisted departures, is that that's a assisted departure to a temporary third location, a safe location, so that Canadians can then make their way back to Canada.
Likely would they be responsible, though, for that second leg of the trip, wherever it may go?
So again, I can't commit for the response that would take place in Lebanon, but if you look at the last few assisted departures on behalf of the government of Canada, that was the case. The transportation to that third safe location was made available by the government of Canada, and then once at that safe third location, accommodation and onward travel is the responsibility of the Canadian.
So when I think back to the 2006 evacuation, I actually interviewed the then Foreign Affairs Minister, Peter MacKay, a few days ago on that. It was a different situation in that there wasn't time really to prepare, right, because of how sudden the conflict there broke out. But at the same time, some of the conditions are the same in that if there is a conflict, the airport becomes largely unusable. I think that's part of why the foreign minister now is saying get on a commercial flight while you can. Should I assume from that, or can I interpret from that, that different resources beyond just planes are being deployed in order to do that evacuation, should it be necessary?
Yeah, I think what I can say is our planning is robust and takes into account all sorts of scenarios. We did have the experience in 2006, and those lessons learned, those experiences have built into our planning. Since then, it's a plan that is not new, it's robust, it's been exercised quite a bit. It is a whole of government response for Canada, but not only that, we also are working with other international partners and other countries on such an evacuation based on our 2006 lessons learned. So I would say it is a very robust and collaborative plan.
And just finally, very quickly, when you say you do feel ready, we do feel ready, does that mean should all the Canadians who want to leave decide that that's the case, you are able, you have the capacity to evacuate all of them?
We feel ready to be able to help Canadian citizens with their requirements should Canada proceed with an assisted departure. Yes, it will take time. The numbers are significant. But in terms of preparing, in terms of having a plan, in terms of having a whole of government capacity to respond, I do believe we're there.
Okay, Ambassador, I'll leave it there. I appreciate your time today very much. And please, to you and all your staff there, do stay safe.
Thanks very much.